Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny.
And I'm Phil.
And it's been a while. Obviously, now we've got something to talk about. The FAQs just dropped hot off the press. It is pretty hot in the UK at the minute for anyone who's listening abroad. So if you see us sweating, it's probably not from the excitement.
Yeah, or exertion. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the heat.
So, Phil, should we start with the big, bulky, big rulebook FAQ first?
Yes, 8 pages. Yeah.
It's getting up there.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, a lot of it is errata. There's three pages.
Surely that makes it worse.
I thought that was a positive thing to say, but there we go. Right, jumping straight in. It's pink. We know what the changes are. This is great.
Yep. That was the first thing I wanted to highlight. Like, well done for listening. Incredible.
Yeah.
If they are listening, my other thought was, before we get all the way into it,
Yeah.
and I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, but my opinion is errata is for changing rules, FAQ is for clarification, and the answer should include a reference to a rule already in existence. And
certainly the first bit, yeah. Errata is a change. FAQ is a clarification. Do you need a reference? Ideally, yeah, but
yeah.
maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's
I don't think, like, if it's a really obvious rule that is like really obviously found in the book, maybe you don't need the reference itself, but the ruling should be based on rules in existence, not a brand new rule.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't think I think technically an FAQ shouldn't be an introduction of a new rule or a new rewording, because that's an errata. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Just, I wanted to get that in agreement before we jump in, because that might come up.
I'm already like, where are you going with this one? But yeah.
But we'll jump into the main one. Do you want to? I assume you've already spotted some pink, have you?
Yeah. So page 1, so flak, page 117, add the following to the 5th paragraph. Note the vehicle-mounted flak machine guns do not halve their shots when fired against aircraft. So that is in the section of flak with regards to air observers. I'm assuming, to be honest, that's just added because it is in there, but it's in there under vehicle-mounted machine guns, which I guess is on page 134. But actually, where you also want to know about it is when you're firing flak when you're resolving an airstrike. So let's put it in the same page, i.e. page 117.
Yeah, which is funny because actually the place where this would have been a brilliant little note would be in the main rulebook. Because the whole point of adding it is because it's being missed because it's not in the place you expect it to be. So it's a shame it didn't get the first run, but at least you could cut this out and stick it in your book, I guess.
Yeah. Moving on to the second page, we've got key positions. So replace the 4th paragraph with the following. To capture an objective, one of your infantry or artillery units, brackets, or a transport including one such unit, must end its activation within 3 inches of the objective, and there must be no enemy unit of any type within 3 inches of it. So the change here is to confirm that an occupied transport or a tow, in the case of an artillery piece, can capture an objective if it ends its activation within 3 inches of the objective, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, interesting.
So it's the change is about the transported unit.
Yeah, the change is that if you've got a transport with such a unit inside, you're good to go. Did the old one not have that condition?
No. It just said if an infantry or artillery unit, and then certainly, monitoring Facebook and stuff, questions were being asked about, well, what if I've got a unit inside a transport? Because it used to be the case in V2 that transported units could take objectives.
Yeah,
and then it went
this
back
is
and
the way
forth
we
between
played
TOs. Yeah, and I know certain TOs said no, they got to get out and so on. So
yeah, I think it was the same. I think you're right. I think that it was like a TO specific one, but everyone had come to a conclusion that it was fine.
Yes. Yep. Page 183, company commander, add the following. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. Basically, where this has come from is when they allowed you to add horses or bicycles or motorcycles to platoon commanders, which came through the FAQ. Obviously, they didn't at that point also say, and this applies to company commanders. What they've done here is just clarify in the errata, not the FAQ, that you can do it for company commanders.
I think it is an addition, so I think it's an errata.
No, but what I mean is the previous one wasn't. I don't think it was an errata.
It was in the FAQ section where they added for the platoon.
Yeah.
But The good thing is you can now have horses all the way down, basically.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So in order to do so, you need to make sure that there must be one platoon minimum that where all the compulsory units, i.e., the two infantry in the case of a rifle and a platoon, is mounted on the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm thinking like Polish Polish forces, for example. I was going to say Japanese, but they're not Japanese because they don't get cavalry at the moment. But yeah, yeah, or bicycles. Well, can the Paras
Or
take Welbecks? Or
y-
your favourite, the
or
Kratchitson?
we could do Hell's Angels. We could
Recce platoons would be a really good example, and then your company commanders also on a motorbike and so on. But yeah,
I mean, it's cool. I don't think it's game changing, but it's a cool, nice addition. I'm a fan of that.
yeah. And then the next one, transport and tows. This is about ambulances. So I think this has been added because it wasn't clear where or how you added a vehicle ambulance to a platoon. So
Yep.
you have the medic within the rifle, and are they in the recce platoon? Certainly in the rifle platoon. This is basically just saying that a ambulance, medical vehicle, counts as a medic with regards to platoon structures and selectors,
Yeah, absolutely.
as long as the platoon allows transports, which
Which is an
they
interesting little
do
addition.
because it's recce and rifle platoons, or certainly rifle platoons, which allow transports. Yeah, maybe it's future proofing. Who knows?
Are there any platoons that don't allow transports? Armored platoons, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But you
Yeah.
can't take a medic in an armored platoon.
Yeah, you can't take a medic or transport, so the
So
ambulance was never on
okay,
the
actually,
table.
this is thinking out loud here. So maybe what this is saying is you can't take an armored platoon and use a medic vehicle as one of your slots in an armored platoon, if that makes
Yeah, you
sense.
could use your ambulance as your
Mm,
platoon commander.
yeah. Okay, yeah. Anyway, let's summarize that. Now we know how you can take a medical vehicle.
And do you know what? Having never seen anyone run an ambulance, I'm glad that's been clarified.
Yeah. And then the last little errata for the main rulebook, this is page 266. So this is the Lend-Lease bit. So there's two bits here. So they added the Soviet Lend-Leased vehicles in the last FAQ.
Mhm.
What wasn't included at that point was 2 points. One was about gyrostabilizers and one was about the role of the M3 White Scout car. So they've now clarified that gyrostabilizers don't apply. Put my teeth back in. Don't apply to Soviets because it's a US thing rather than a Soviet thing. And the other one, which I'm glad to see, is the M3 Scout car. It was originally listed as an armored car. It's now correctly listed as a transport and tow. Although that does pose the question, can you take it as an armored car? But you can because there's the option within the unit to give it recce and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, nice little clarifiers. I don't really have any qualms with that. That's fine. I mean, my only complaint, I guess, is that it's pretty dull. Like there's nothing game changing here because we always, whenever there's a release, we like something, a little bit of excitement to come in. But that isn't.
Mhm. Yeah.
But you can't really
So I
criticize a document intended for tidying for not being exciting.
I was going to say actually, is that not a positive? Because it does suggest that where an errata's been added, where there has been a change to the rules, it's because previously something was missing or something was wrong. Actually, if we've only got a couple or three or four in this time, that suggests, I'm throwing it out there, that maybe things are getting better.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I was rather hoping for, which were
Okay.
I was hoping we could get away from V2 spotters and back to V3 spotters, where you could spot for more than one thing at a time. Because I actually thought that was a brilliant rule, call mechanic. And so I was hoping, since we already went through three versions of it, I was hoping for a fourth to go back to the version that I preferred, because I think it's nice. And then the other thing I was really hoping for is smoke. Give me either scattering smoke or V2 smoke at the very least, because I've played lots of games recently where smoke would have been a really fun little addition to the game.
Mm. Yeah. I'm not disagreeing about the smoke. I think that was something we flagged up right, on the very first V3 episode, that wouldn't it be cool to do it? Minor detour, Chain of Command 2's come out recently, and that's always one that's cited as a good example of smoke rules, ignoring, whether or not you like the game. But there are good smoke rules within Chain of Command 2, and I think there's definitely tactics where dropping a smoke screen actually might be beneficial, but at the moment it's still not there.
100%,
Spot
especially with cover saves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spotters, I don't have a thought currently. It's too hot to have a thought on it currently.
Let me know when you spotted one.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah.
Um, so,
So
should we go into the FAQ, which isn't new rules? It's purely questions.
yes, so FAQ. So we're going to page 6 of the document, 6 of 8. The first one in pink is about Japanese heavy weapons platoon. Do you want to do this one? Because I still don't get it, if I'm honest. It still doesn't quite make sense to
So,
me.
I think the person who has responded to this has a number of issues with their reading of the wording of this rule and
Mhm.
also the wording of their response. The rule, admittedly, isn't written super clearly.
Mhm.
So the original rule says you may take up to 3 Suicide AT teams as one selection in each platoon selector that includes AT teams. Note that you can do this in addition to an AT rifle team in selectors that allow you to field an anti-tank team.
Yes.
So
Anti-tank team or anti-tank
it just
rifle?
says field an anti-tank team,
Okay.
which
Yep.
again adds a little bit of extra confusion at the end there. That
Are
they've
you
said
re-
you can take an anti-tank rifle if an anti-tank team is allowed. But we'll just skirt over that because actually the big question is basically, so I read that. My reading of that rule is for every selector I have, for every like option to take an anti-tank, I can take 3 bomb sticks. Now, the FAQ's interpretation is that only 1 slot per platoon.
Yes.
And I can kind of see how you get that reading because it doesn't say for every slot, it says you may take up to 3 as one selection,
Yes.
but it doesn't say and only one selection, which is why I read it as 3 counts as 1, is what that
Yeah.
sentence says to me.
Yeah.
And so that to me says you could, if for example, you could have 3 AT teams in a platoon, you could have 9 bomb sticks.
Such as a heavy weapons platoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I think. Whereas the FAQ's gone the other way. They say if you've got 3 AT options, one of them can be 3 bomb sticks and the other 2 can't be.
Which currently is only going to be AT rifles because you don't have, for example, there was a unit, wasn't there, in V2, which wasn't an AT rifle and wasn't a suicide team. It was an improvised AT team, something like that. It got added. I never used
Yeah.
them. It got added, I think, in a campaign book.
But then the question that then raises is can the 2 options that aren't my 3 bomb sticks be 2 bomb sticks?
Well, not according to this, no.
Well, it doesn't say they can't be. It just says that I can't use the extra selection rule. It says it's saying that I can only use the extra selection rule once per platoon.
No, so the final answer in a heavy weapons platoon, you can have either 0 to 3 AT rifle teams or 0 to 2 AT rifle teams and 0 to 3 suicide AT teams.
But before we jump onto that, because that's actually nonsense as well, because it says, so let's read the answer from the FAQ.
Yeah.
Just one AT team slot per platoon can be replaced by 0 to 3 suicide teams. Note that if you do so, you can also have one additional AT rifle team, as
Yeah.
stated on page 272.
Yeah.
Therefore, in a rifle platoon, you can have 0 to 1 AT rifle team and 0 to 3 suicide AT teams because you get the extra selection rule says you can have an additional anti tank rifle.
Yes.
And then when we get to the heavy weapons platoon,
Yeah.
you get 3 AT choices,
3 slots.
which means if 2 of them are AT rifles, you take the
Yeah.
third as your 3 bomb sticks, you
Yeah.
get an extra AT rifle. So the
Yes.
FAQ should say, by
Yeah.
that reading,
Yeah.
0 to 3 AT rifle teams and 0 to 3 suicide AT teams.
See, that is what I was expecting. Now, I think where this has come from, and I may have said this on the pod, I've definitely said this off the pod if I haven't said it
IRL.
on the pod, IRL. That wording on page 272, extra selection, you may take up to 3 suicide anti-tank teams as one selection in each platoon selector that includes anti-tank teams. Know that you can do this in addition to an anti-tank rifle team in selectors that allow you to field an anti-tank team. That is directly lifted from effectively V1. If you go and look at the Armies of Japan, and I think it's to do with some of the theatre selectors in the Armies of Japan book, where some of them allowed you to have no anti-tank rifle teams, for example. Others allowed you to have anti-tank rifle teams, but you could also, like, you have 0 to 2, for example. And this was basically saying, okay, well, one of those 2 can be 3 suicide guys. I think what we got stuck into is a lifting of a V1 rule, V1, V2 rule, putting it into a V3 context. The V3 context now allows you to have in a heavy weapons platoon 3 slots. Okay, so can I take 9? Well, no, that's too many. We now need to backpedal a little bit and kind of work it out. I'm hoping that the Armies of Japan will just sort this out, but we've got to wait until January 26th for that.
I think, the wording is 3 per slot, so you could have 9. Like that's the wording. It's clear. As you said, I think someone has faced 9 of them, got a bit sad about it, and decided that they don't like the rule anymore, and decided to change it in an FAQ.
The flippant side of me, and this is tongue in cheek because I do play Japanese, is that no one's doing well with Japanese at the moment, so it's kind of irrelevant, and we'll sort it out in January. But that isn't true because people are playing Japanese and doing well with them. It's because it got FAQ'd last edition, and it's been FAQ'd again, and I still don't think it's exactly not correct. That's the wrong word to use because it's not for me to say if it's correct or not. I just don't think it's clear based on what's written and what the answer says and so on.
Yeah. I think, someone just doesn't like the idea of 9 bomb sticks and just wants it to be different. But shall we move on to the next FAQ?
Yeah, so page 7. So, couple of questions about tanks. So, do tanks need line of sight when assaulting? Yes, they do, including when assaulting a new unit after going through the initial target.
Good. It's good. It tidies it up. It brings it in line with troops.
Infantry.
However, it's a new rule because it's not in the main rulebook, that rule. So should that not be in the errata?
In what sense is it a new rule?
Because nowhere, it's not stated anywhere as a rule that they have to have line of sight, which is why this question's been asked, because the convention is that to do an assault, you need line of sight. But nowhere does it explicitly state that tanks need it. So actually, I would argue that you should make this an errata added to the tank combat part of the rulebook.
I believe where it's come from. Well, I don't believe I know where it's come from. I know where it's come from. It's come from in the rulebook. We're talking about tank assaults. It says tanks assault in the same way as infantry. Then it goes on to talk about something which doesn't quite follow the mechanics of infantry.
Yeah.
So there's a query there about when you declare your assault as a tank, are you just like infantry? In which case, do you need line of sight? Yes, you do, Phil. But where does it say that? Oh, it doesn't. Can we get that clarified?
Exactly. Yeah. But this is why I think, in the same way we had that little flak note, this could have been a nice little note. In the same way as infantry, open brackets, i.e. you need line of sight, close brackets, done. But let's move past it. Let's move on to the next one. Still quite tanky, though.
Still tanky, yeah. So if a tank is assaulting an enemy while moving through rough ground, does it have to move at least 4.5 inches, i.e. half a run move, because the order's a run to assault, reduced to advanced speed, because that's what happens when infantry run through rough ground? Yes, that is correct. So you can assault as a tank through rough ground. You still need to move half your distance, which in this case is 4.5.
Oh, that is interesting, actually, because tanks can't run through rough ground, can they?
Well, they can, according to this.
Yeah, like this isn't... what I mean is rules as written. Tanks can't run through rough ground. Tanks have to run to charge. And so we've changed that tanks can run through rough ground when they're charging.
But infantry can't run through rough ground.
Yeah, we added an exception for that in the same way.
We add an exception when you're assaulting. So I guess by extension, tanks can't run through rough ground. The exception is when assaulting. So it's the same thing. Neither can run in inverted commas through rough ground, but both of them can assault through rough ground. But the speed is reduced to an advanced speed, not a run speed. And you have to meet the minimum criteria, which is to move at least half of your distance.
Yeah, but again, it's a new rule because now tanks can run through rough ground on this specific instance, which is interesting. Does it really matter? I guess it does a little bit. It's a little bit weird that like a really slow lumbering tank like going through the rough ground. The troops are terrified and can't get out of the way quick enough. Yeah. But perhaps it's a bit okay. I genuinely don't know with this one, to be honest.
I think when you try and put it into like real life in inverted commas as much as you can with bolt action, like the whole point of a tank assaulting other units is it's got momentum. It's got to move in open ground. It's got to move 9 inches minimum. It's generated momentum. It's steaming towards a bunch of people. There's a huge weight coming your way. You're going to go and run away. Actually, this doesn't quite work when you're steaming through at a reduced rate a bunch of trees or some rubble.
Equally, though, from a games mechanics perspective, actually, this is a positive move because otherwise you have this really peculiar instance where the tank can't push men out the way. Because we're
Yeah.
saying like it doesn't make sense for him to run them over when he's going so slowly, but at the same time, like they're not going to stand there, and
No.
so it does give them that capacity to push them out the way. And I guess like a more advanced rule set would give you advantages to your charge based on how fast you're going.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're starting to get into sort of these more complex games. So
Yeah.
actually, I think that's a positive change. I just wish it was an errata that said
Okay.
tanks can run through rough ground when charging. The next one, I think, if you're happy to move on, I think the
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
how I've always played the game and how I've always seen
Yeah.
everyone else play the game. And so I think it's just for
100%.
like new players who are sort of getting
Yeah.
used to it.
I think it's come up a few times. I think Warlord have been asked it, and it's just confirming that obviously with regards to cover saves and down and all that kind of thing, you do need to take note of when some of the target unit is within point blank range and some of it isn't, because the cover save will change, which goes against, I guess the confusion is because normally with cover saves, it's like, is it 50% in or out,
Yeah.
shooters, target unit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but because historically, so like your V2 players, we used to have this exact situation where half your rifles would be in
Yeah.
short range, half in long range. And so we've always had a similar situation like this occur where
Yeah.
you're doing separate shots. And so I guess for the new players, and also the fact that this down thing's a bit weird. Like I'm not particularly happy about down being ignored, but equally because it takes away that like forcing your opponent down, which was always a big part of bolt action. You get to point blank, you force them down, which allows your other squad to advance. But that's a bigger conversation for perhaps a full episode in itself. So I'm happy to move on if you will.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, yeah. The next one's interesting.
Yep.
So this is to do with hold until relieved. So in hold until relieved, is the objective control worked out at the end of each unit's activation or just once at the end of the game? Just once at the end of the game. Now, the reason this is interesting is certainly in all the events I've been at where we've played hold until relieved to date, we've played it in the same way as key positions. So you control the objective at the first point in whatever turn it is that a unit finishes its activation within 3 inches of it.
Well, can I just interject to read you page 167, the actual wording from the rulebook on hold until relief to see why people might be playing it like that? Because it says, and I'm just going to take snippets from this that are pertinent. Set up an objective marker, open brackets, see key positions, page 164, and then at the end of the game, it's at the end of the paragraph, it says to control the objective, one of your infantry artillery must end its activation within 3 inches of the objective. And so actually don't know how I'm playing this game now because if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
capturing it by ending the activation, but then that doesn't count until the end of the game. But if the game's ended, I can't activate. How am I holding this objective?
Yeah, and actually, also just jump back one sentence. The aim is to control the strategic objective at the end of the game. Now, we've read, certainly where I've been at events, we've read that and said it's at the end of turn 6 or turn 7, if you roll for turn 7, where whoever holds it at the end of that wins. But you can hold it, you can capture it at any point from the first dice on turn 1 onwards.
Well, that's what it says because it says to control it, you just have to end an activation, which you can do from turn 1 with an infiltrator.
Yeah, but the FAQ is saying no, you only work out the control of the objective at the end of the game.
Yeah, and this is where, again, if they want to do that, it needs to go in the errata and you need to change the wording of the mission because, as I think you said this for like a previous one, we've just added more confusion here. We haven't added clarification with this FAQ.
Well, no, I think it is clear. It's clear that in this instance, so in key positions, you control the objective at any point. A unit holds that objective by finishing their activation. I think what this is saying with the FAQ is that you only need to concern yourself with the objective control and contest at the very end of the game. It doesn't matter. It's like old school V2 key positions, old school V2 hold until relieved.
And if they'd added to work out who controls it at the end of the game, you need a unit within 3 inches and no enemy within 3 inches. I totally agree. But because we still have that activation clause live, if you have an activated unit next to the objective at the end of the game because we run out of time, and I don't have an activated unit, but I do have a unit within 3 inches,
Yeah, no one has it.
I guess I'm contesting even with a non-activated unit.
Yeah.
And then so let's say the game ends. You've got a unit within 3 inches. No one else within 3 inches. You haven't activated that unit. No one holds that objective, even though you're surrounding it and I'm nowhere
Yeah,
near
no,
it.
I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's gotten quite muddy, and I think it could have been really nicely tied up by just adding that additional clause of to see who owns it. End of the game, 3 inches, 3 inches, done.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
again,
Anyway,
errata
I
though.
mean,
That's an
let's
errata.
assume let's assume that is the case. So let's assume that in Holding to Relieve, it is old school V2 V1.
Yeah.
It might actually make Holding to Relieve potentially be worth considering in a tournament, whereas at the moment it's a waste of time in my
Oh,
view.
I'm the opposite.
Go on.
I like it with a sticky because you can do an
Ah,
early sticky and then you can do like a strategic sweep sideways, all this, and then your opponent has to worry about are you going to counter the sweep at expense of the objective and then like hope I beat the sweep and I still have time, or do I go for the objective and ignore like this big swinging
yeah, yeah.
force around the side? Um, and I actually think it's better with sticky personally.
Okay.
Whereas if it's at the end, I think it just results in a big punch up in the middle because you're basically just going to throw your forces in, and then whoever's there at the end wins.
Hmm.
Yeah.
On the flip side, at the moment, certainly where I've played it at events, whoever gets it first probably wins the game.
Well, funnily, I just lost the game exactly like that.
Okay.
With Rangers, I took my Rangers, I led the way, I started on the objective, I ran past it,
Yeah, yeah,
playing
standard
that
tactic.
exactly that tactic I was just saying, where I was going to do a big sweep and then like mop them up, distract it. It worked as well. Like he was sending his bloke sideways, and I'm thinking this is brilliant. And then I just end up getting tabled.
Okay.
And so turn six, he managed to just walk onto it and have it. But
Yeah, yeah.
for 5.5 turns there, I was winning that game quite confidently.
Should have slow played. Anyway, right, next one. Can a cavalry unit dismount at the end of an escape move? Yes, it can.
Which is
Cool.
interesting.
Yeah.
You put after your escape move, what dice are you putting next to it? Are you putting an advanced dice next to it or a down dice
Yeah.
next to
No,
it?
don't you put an advance or a run, depending on how what you do.
Yeah, I'm
In the
trying to
cavalry
remember because
case, it's
V2
an
it used to be
advance.
old. It used to
Yeah, it
be a
used to be
down
down,
dice,
didn't
didn't it? Which
it?
was a
But
bit tasty.
it changed. Page 150. Yeah.
Mhm.
Once the escape move is done, turn the vehicle's dice to advance or run.
Perfect. So there we go. So there's no advantage to cover for doing that.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the reason why you would do it is if your cavalry unit gets targeted, you declare an escape move. You can only advance, can't you, on a as a cavalry? You
Mhm.
can't do the run. So you advance 9 inches and you dismount, probably because you could dismount into cover because it's obviously cavalry get
Yeah.
the -1. Yeah, so actually
Yeah.
that's quite handy.
The other tasty thing actually is if someone's put an objective in a house, you can now recce into
You
that
can now
house,
you can escape move into a house and claim the objective. Yes,
which
yeah,
is quite tasty. So actually, like it does have a place, even if you're not getting the big benefit of going down at the end.
yeah.
Um,
We'll come on to that in a moment because there's a similar question along those lines.
cool. The next, if you're ready to move on, the next one
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
it's like a yeah, but then the wording of your answers a little bit like
I feel a bit like this is a start the clock moment because I can remember this in V2.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
when is a man not a man when he's an NCO? When is an NCO not a man when he's a loader? And all this kind of stuff. It's like, can a man or an NCO pick up a weapon? Blah blah blah
yeah.
blah blah.
When is a man not a man?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually quite like it. It basically just says that if we use the word man, we mean not an NCO or an
Not an
officer.
NCO. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that's fine. I was a little bit now the thing that made me question it a bit is it goes on to then specify cases where the NCO would be included. And I started to worry that we were starting to lose it a bit where it says like up to 2 models. But then actually I've had a look through the latest releases and they tend to say up to 2 men. And so actually I don't think they've added any confusion there, which is quite nice. But it's quite a long response for quite a simple question that is sort of most people have played it that way anyway.
Yeah, I guess where it's come from is situations potentially maybe in competitive tournament play where you got a guy with a Panzerfaust or a guy with a
Mhm.
well whatever. Yeah, let's go for Panzerfaust for example. He gets killed. Can the NCO in inverted commas pick up the Panzerfaust? Can the NCO become the loader? All that sort of thing. Because that kind of that might matter in that context. Casual games, you might be a bit like whatever, but in in a competitive context, it might matter.
Yeah, well, back in the day, you used to give stuff to your NCO. Like, you'd give your best gear to the NCO because you'd keep him to last. Now there's so much morale boosting going on the table because you're being forced to take 6 officers that doesn't matter as much. Plus, the only thing snipers can hurt are NCOs.
Or
Is
NCOs,
actually now the last man you want to give an upgrade to. And
yeah,
so, actually, this FAQ is about a year behind when it was like pressing because people were really wanting to do that in V2. And now I
yeah,
think people aren't that fussed about loading their NCOs out.
yeah.
Yeah.
The next one's a nice little tidy one. Does an HMG with +1 pen apply pins to an inexperienced or regular vehicle shooting at more than half range? Yes, it does. So it's the fact that it's a heavy weapon, not the fact that its penetration modifier has gone from +1 down to 0 because you've gone over half range. I like that one. That's nice and clear.
Yeah, it's good. I like how crisp it is as well.
Yeah.
No nonsense.
Next one. Does the reinforced front armor rule work against attacks like Soviet AT dogs and IJA suicide teams? No, it doesn't. Because these are, sorry, it doesn't work against either because it states shots, so it only applies against ranged attacks.
So I agree with the answer, but not the justification. Like I don't think we need to say whether they're shots or not, because actually, the both of them have a clause that you take it on the base armor without modification, and the reinforced front plate is a modification. And so actually, we don't need to determine whether they're shots or not, because you're using the base armor value, which for a Panther is 9.
Yeah, so I'm just reading the suicide IJA one. So you resolve a hit against the vehicle with a penetration value of +8, brackets, no other penetration modifiers apply. Yeah, so the
Yeah.
modifiers being for side armor, rear armor, top armor, and so on.
Yeah, and the thing that's funny that like I think is the oversight is actually we always think of the modifiers as being downwards, but actually the front plate one is a modifier. It just goes in the other direction, it goes up.
Yeah.
And so I mean I think it still needs an FAQ, and I'm
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
that
yeah.
it's there. It's one of those ones where I'm just like, I like your answer, but not your justification.
Yeah. So what I think is missing here, and
Well, a whole
readers,
new question, isn't it, that you
yeah,
think's missing, isn't it?
it's a whole new question, but listeners, settle down, get ready, strap yourself in for this one.
Mm.
This basically says that Soviet dog mines don't give cover saves.
Yep.
Yeah, because it says that it's not a shot.
Can I counter though with dog mines,
Hmm.
a dog mine is a one-shot weapon with a range of 18.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I mean, we're using the term one shot to mean single use, I think,
yeah,
is
yeah,
it would be the counter argument. Like we're using it in a non-specific way. But it is funny to say that it's not a shot,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a one-shot weapon.
So it's I'm actually picking up on it only applies against ranged attacks. So, and I know because I was involved in this
Mm.
question. Um,
Well, can I read the next part, which says with a range of 18?
Yeah. So what the response was things like Soviet AT dog mines and suicide teams. They have a special table that you follow, or a special process that you follow when you resolve the attack, which isn't the standard. Declare your target, check line of sight, check range, check to hit, check to pen, check to damage. So basically what this is saying is that the Soviet dog mines don't give cover saves because you essentially just roll on that chart, and nowhere on the chart does it say brackets apply a cover save if any intervening terrain between the dog mine and the target unit.
Yeah, but equally, it doesn't say that for any weapons because that's in the core rules.
I
So
know.
the omission of that, I think the thing that causes the thing, like, I think this is the broken record moment where because it's a V1 rule, carried into V2, carried into V3, but it says instead of rolling to hit now in V2, we applied those cover modifiers to the to hit roll, which meant if you're not doing it to hit roll, you don't get cover. And so like
Yeah.
that convention would say you're not getting cover. And so, but also if we go a little bit thematic, it kind of makes sense that like the dog's going to jump over the hedge or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I've always struggled with in V3 with the concept of a dog mine allow you basically being able to have a cover save against a dog mine that either the dog runs under the vehicles and blows up or it doesn't. Like the fact there's a hedge in between is accounted for by the die roll of 2 or 3 when it doesn't even make it to the vehicle to blow it up.
Yeah, but I think the counterpoint to that for me, if we're talking like thematic, like what makes sense, would be if there's a squad between you and the tank, and there's this dog with a bomb strapped to his back running towards the men who are in front of this tank, and they've all got rifles. One of them very well might take a shot at this dog, or at the very least, it might distract the dog. If the dog's not looking aggressive, they might stop and pet the dog, and then the dog never gets to the tank. And so there is equally the other way around. The cover might make the dog get to the tank more easily because if the tank can't see the dog because it's behind a wall for 90% of the advance towards the tank, then maybe you should be hitting on an even better one. So maybe infantry should give you a cover save, but tanks give you a negative cover save.
Right, ignore that. Stop. No, no cover saves. Move on.
Yeah, I agree. And also, actually, just going back to like it making sense, the
Yeah,
fact that your reinforced front isn't giving you extra protection against the dog that's crawled under your tank, I'm
yeah,
very happy with. That makes sense to me. And
yeah.
so I actually think, as I said, I think good rule needs a better justification. And we need that extra question, please.
I'm not going to read the question because it's quite long, but effectively what this one is saying is that anything that requires a unit to get an order dice at the end of it doing something counts as an activation. So, for example, if a unit foobars and it foobars and ends up within 3 inches of an objective, it is activated. If that objective wasn't previously controlled, you can now control it. Likewise, if a unit is inside a transport vehicle, the transport vehicle blows up, the unit then has to dismount and goes down. If it goes down within 3 inches of an objective, does it count as now controlling it? If it was previously not controlled, yes, it does.
Yeah, I don't like this. I think this doesn't, it's bad game mechanics because the bad thing has happened and it's turned out good for the person who the bad thing happened to. Like
Yeah,
my units ran away and oh, they've captured the objective by running away in terror from the enemy. Huzzah. So that's annoying. First of all, I think it's not good games mechanics. But also, I think if you're forced down, you haven't activated.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
my reading of it. Like you activate by following an order.
yeah.
And this is where, so I often read this activation when it came up in the text as a successful activation.
Yeah,
But actually what we're saying is what this explicitly says actually is that anytime a unit is assigned a dice,
it,
that is what we mean by
yes,
activation. But what this
100%.
means as well is a lot of players are playing that to do a snap two, your officer has to successfully activate. Is the word successful in that rule? Or
In
does
what
it just
rule?
say the
In
officer has to
the
activate?
no. It does say successful or
It does say
something to like that.
successful.
It does say under Snap 2, the officer needs to successfully receive an order or something.
Perfect. So that
Pretty much
hasn't
words to that
been,
effect.
so that actually isn't affected by this.
No. So I agree with you, and I've certainly had this in games where I have caused. Let's go back to the cavalry, for example. I've caused a cavalry unit to escape, and its escape moved onto an objective and then claimed the objective because it's activated because it receives the advance at the end of that. You and I've had it at Beachhead where you shot one of my transports. I dismounted onto an empty objective, and we had a whole conversation about whether or not I had activated in order to claim that objective. I like that it's clear, but I personally think an activation should be a positive thing. When you're doing an escape move, you're basically going "Ruh," and running away. When you're dismounting from a blown up transport, you're going geez and getting to ground kind of thing. When you foobar, you're absolutely not doing that consciously in a positive way. So I would have preferred it to have said when you successfully received an order, you have activated. So it's a positive thing rather than just when you get a dice you've activated. But it's clear. At least it's clear. That's
Yeah.
better than
I
nothing.
would have changed the wording I would have added an errata to the actual like key positions rule. And I would have just taken, because you're absolutely right. You meant snap to action does have all the clauses you need. It says receives an order successfully, other than down, um, blah, blah, blah. And I think that is what you should have to do to take an objective. Because otherwise, you do open the door to like the gamey tactics that a lot of people say they don't like. Things like you push your transport past the objective, like tempt your enemy, come on, have a shot at it so I can fall out and grab this,
Yeah.
which allows you to go further out of your transport than really you should have.
Yeah, yeah,
Because if the objective's like, I don't know, 30 inches from you, you do your 24-inch run with your transport
yeah.
and fall out. Well, you only need
Another,
3 inches
yeah,
to
yeah,
catch it. And
yeah.
so I don't like it. I think I want the successful version. I couldn't agree more with
Yeah,
your
yeah.
your previous statements.
I did exactly that against I won't name names, but Three Good Men. I advanced my transport beyond the objective. Kill points didn't matter because it was about objectives, and I was basically baiting my opponent to blow up the transport so I could then fall onto the objective and claim it, whilst also giving myself hard cover because I've just got a piece of I had a comms omelette in this case in front of me. So yeah.
Well, more on that coming up soon. In fact, in the
Okay.
very next question, let's talk about that. So, what's the next question say, Phil?
Yeah, so if more than 50% of a unit's models are out of the arc of fire of a fixed weapon or a vehicle mounted weapon, and the unit is in the open, does the unit get a cover save? So it's a good question, this one. So if you've got
Yeah,
a 45-degree arc of fire, front arc, for example, you've got 8 guys in a unit, only 2 of them fall within your front 45-degree arc. Are you getting cover? Now, this came up at the WTC. I'm aware of this, talking to players who went there, and what the answer is that no, cover saves only originate from intervening troops or terrain. Pause for breath there, Johnny, before you jump in. So what this is saying is that cover only comes from intervening things. So the original question is saying if I can only see 2 out of 8 guys, is that unit getting a cover save? The answer is saying no. There's nothing blocking the intervening. Well, there's nothing intervening between the shooter and the target. 100% agree with that. I don't see why you would get a cover save. And there's actually a line, isn't there, in the shooting rules that says, imagine the position of models is fluid, and that's why we're able to. If you've got a unit that's like 6 guys behind a wall or behind a building out of sight, and 2 of them you can see, they get hard cover. You kill 5 of them, you can take guys from around the corner, even though you physically couldn't have a line of fire to them because it's a fluid situation. I agree with all of that. Now I'm going to hand over to you for the problem.
I have lots of issues here. This is an occasion where we actually disagree, so it'll be
Okay.
interesting to see how heated this gets. So first of all, the response is bad because it doesn't say intervening objects. It says cover saves only originate from intervening troops and terrain, which
Yeah.
means that big fat Sherman, the
Yes.
jumbo Sherman you've parked in front of your boys, basically doesn't exist if we go by this rule. Like you're not getting cover from any vehicles.
Yeah. Well, it's not a rule though, is it? Because it's an FAQ, so it's a explanation. I
Okay,
agree. I
but it's
agree
an
with you.
explanation
If
of the
it's
rules, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
And so,
if it had said intervening models or terrain.
yeah, exactly. And then
Yeah.
that's exactly, and this is my big problem with a lot of these FAQ responses, isn't like the questions and the answers themselves. It's like the specificity, I
Yep.
think is the
Yep.
word,
Specificity. Yep.
specificity of language. Like when we're writing this, we need to stop, pause, and think like, is the word that I'm using here covering all of the bases? Because you're right, all we need to do is change the word troops to models,
Yeah.
and you've covered your bases there.
It's similar to when we talked about Gerbesjäger in the armies of Germany, and it says the Gerbesjäger rule says they ignore or they treat difficult ground as open ground. There's no such thing as difficult ground in the bolt
Yeah.
action rulebook. It's rough ground.
I think there
Now
wasn't
the
third edition 40k though.
Okay, well, unfortunately, with third edition bolt action, um, the we all understand the meaning as Gerbesjäger. You ignore Fieldcraft rule. You ignore rough ground. You treat it as open ground. But the fact that it specifically says difficult ground, it's like this is a technical term. Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
universal special rule, if you like. Anyway, back to you.
I do like that having a turret is more useful. Like because as you're saying the fluid
Yeah,
situation, I'm not imagining they're like fluidly 12 inches from where they are. They're like an inch left or right, you know what I mean? Or you
yeah,
caught them as they were moving. And I have to imagine, like, if you are on the machine gun on the front of the Bren, it's going to be a lot easier to hit someone if the full squad is in front of the Bren
yes,
than if, like, one man is in front because he's sort of whipped round from the combat that he did on the squad and side. And so I
yeah,
actually think, I think if it was, yes, you do get cover, that's in line with the rules. And it gives turrets a little perk that actually you're paying points for anyway. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not like it's a free perk.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I do agree with that. However, I think at the moment, currently, it might be the heat. Uh, I just want clarity, and I've got a clear answer,
Yeah.
and that whether or not it makes sense. At least I don't have to have that back and forth
Yeah,
with my
100%.
opponent, or if I'm TOing with two players and trying to explain to them, no, this is what we're doing. Get on with it, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes back to V2. When I first started playing Finns, I think we had this exact scenario with the Comsomelettes where you engulfed one, and then there was the question, do you get cover? And so it's nice, as you say, that we do finally have some clarity,
Yeah.
even though might not be the way we all want it.
Yeah. And then the last one, can I ignore bits of decoration? Yes, you can.
Yeah, it's a bit of a nothing burger. I think I quite like how at the end it says like agree with your opponent,
Yeah,
because
that
that's
is good. Yeah.
ultimately that's the main rule, isn't it? Like any terrain you put on that table, agree
Yeah.
what it is at the moment it goes down. Don't wait until like turn 5 when you're crouching behind a tree and you're thinking you're getting cover. Do it
Yeah.
at the start.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if you listen way back in the midst of time over the last 2.5 years, if you listen to our episode about going to tournaments, I think we're pretty sure that we talk about agreeing the terrain with your opponent beforehand, so you don't get those gotcha moments.
Yeah.
You know, ruins, is the ruin the base, or is it the wall in the ruin? All that kind of stuff. Like how you working on pagodas, on
You know my
buildings and
least
armor.
favorite? Those stone walls with a little bit of like patched up like planks to patch up the hole in the stone wall.
Is it soft?
And
Is it
then
hard?
And then sometimes, like halfway through a game, it's like, oh, well, you stood behind the fenced bit rather than the wall bit. And then, oh, but how many of your models are behind like with stuff like that? I always just rule the entire thing as either soft or hard, and don't. You're getting into too much minutia for a representation of real life.
Yeah. Okay. So we've now got, which I like, we've now split the core FAQ and errata, or the core rules, if you like, uh, from the Armies of books. So we've now got Armies of Germany and Armies of US.
Interesting that you like it. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I quite liked having a single document because the problem is we're going to get to a point once all the army books are released. I'm going to have this big, like, an archive of PDFs in order to keep on top of every army's little. Whereas previously it was just one FAQ. So actually, I'm still on the fence about it a bit, but I guess it stops us having a 60-page document for an FAQ.
Yeah. Should we do Germany?
Yeah, I think so. I think first
Yeah.
out, first to be discussed.
Okay. So first German errata, any instances of the stationary firing platform, this vehicle may not fire if given an advance order.
Sure.
Yeah,
That's
no issues there. Officers change the third option as follows: up to one model may replace their rifle with an assault rifle for plus 6 points. So I think it's previously any model. So stops you kitting out a 6-man, 5-man officer team with rifle with
I
assault
actually
rifles.
looked and it was always one model. What's interesting, and this is why I want to do the FAQ first,
Okay.
is in the original wording, it's up to one man, which by that latest
Ah,
FAQ
is
would mean the
not an
officer
officer.
couldn't have it.
Yeah,
And so
got it.
actually, I quite like that they've tied those two thoughts together that actually will change the wording from man so that it's clear the officer can have the assault rifle.
Yeah.
But the thing that actually surprises me a lot, which I hadn't noticed the first time, probably because assault rifles are so expensive now that I wasn't really that bothered, but I actually don't see a huge problem with people paying for every man to have an assault rifle because they're so expensive and combat's not that good anymore. And also, like, I'm sure there probably were officers who had like the logistical strength to grab enough assault rifles to kit out like full squads with assault rifles, even if not the full platoon, just like at
Yeah.
least their squad.
It was certainly late war they did, didn't they?
Yeah.
The Volkstorm, Volksgrenadiers. One
Oh,
at least
yeah.
one of them. Yeah.
Prime example, exactly. Yeah. So, like, if you're doing an officer in that, it's a shame that all of your men have the assault rifles, but the officer, I guess he's too inexperienced, isn't he? He's just too inexperienced. He couldn't find the assault rifle cache.
Yeah. Stummels. I like this one. This is just a historical tidy up.
Yeah.
So basically, the previous wording was that you could add a pintle-mounted forward-facing MMG, which allowed you to fire two separate shots and therefore put two pins out. This is just clarified. It's not a separate pintle-mounted forward-facing MMG. It's a coaxial MMG.
Oh, that's a bit of a shame. I like the old pin. I mean, the good news is you've saved points. The bad news is you're doing less pins.
Yeah, but I think it's correct in terms of how the
How
MMG
it was used.
worked on a Stummel. Yeah.
It does
We,
make me wonder if it's worth taking now, though, because But then I was thinking about that, and I was thinking actually light howitzers aren't very good anymore because they're doing so few pins.
Yeah,
Half the
D2
time
now.
you
Yeah,
just might as well have shot a rifle.
yeah,
So few hits, and you're getting cover from them when you shoot them direct. Like they go down in cover, you're getting one hit with a 2+ save against it. And so actually in that case, the MG might be better.
yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Next one is the 8 rad, the 231 heavy armor car. It's just sorted out the costs of an inexperienced one.
Yeah, funnily, this was just omitted.
Yeah,
It's not that it was wrong. It just, for
just
some
wasn't there.
reason, it must have just got dropped from the original document when it was sent for print.
Yeah,
Because I think it was just absent. Like it just said inexperienced, then the points cost for regular, then the points
yeah.
cost for veteran.
And the next one, which I am very happy to see, the 254 is not a transport vehicle anymore. It never was. It never was in V2. It was added in the errata in V2. It was added as an anti-aircraft vehicle that sat in the tank slot. In the main rulebook and in Arms Germany, it was an upgrade and you didn't lose your 251 transport capacity. This has now sorted it out. So you can't take a load of 254s with two MMGs.
Yeah,
Because where were the guys sitting with all that ammo and double MGs?
yeah, I like it. It's a good tidy up in terms of making the game more accurate.
It's
Will we still see them, do you
it's
reckon, Phil?
I was going to say it's there's a lot in the same way that com omelettes are now up for on eBay at 1 penny each kind of thing. There's probably going to be a load of 254s appearing, or people are going to be ripping out the double MG. We still see them. They're a cheap anti-aircraft vehicle. So if you know, or if you know, if forward air observers are a thing, depending on where you live and the meta and so on, if you know you're going to come up against US guys with double shot air observers, there are cheaper options. This motorbike sidecar is a flak anti-aircraft option, but this is a pretty cheap anti-aircraft option. So if you didn't want to spend money on a Pintle or onto your Panzer III or whatever, I don't know if you could take one or not, but if you didn't want to spend money on making one of your main vehicles into an anti-aircraft, this is a cheap way of doing it. Will you see them? Maybe not. Have lots of people gone out and bought the kit? Yes, they have, or they 3D printed it. Are they going to be upset now? Quite possibly, yes.
Yeah, I think most of the people who were buying into them knew it was a short-lived thing because
Yeah.
most people who were buying into them played V2. They knew that it didn't have transport capacity then. They thought eventually, like, fate's going to catch up with me here, so I'll just enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
I think jumping onto like, is it worth it? It's 65 points. It's
Yeah.
two machine guns.
Yeah.
As you said, it is very effective against aircraft. So if you're seeing FAOs,
Yeah.
it's a good purchase. And I actually think if you've got your anti-tank sort of wrapped up elsewhere in your force,
Yes.
maybe it's in like your infantry, because
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
like decided to take loads of Faust, a little platoon of these for under 200 points, you can have three of them.
Yeah.
Um, I, oh, sorry, you're going to be over
Near,
because of the
near
command.
enough. Yeah,
205, I think it works out as. But like 200 points for three, that's not bad, because it's
no.
still armor 7, open top, so don't get too close to the enemy. But
Yeah.
not bad, yeah. I'm game. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I tell you what, if anyone's selling them for £1 each, I'll take a few off your
Yeah,
hand.
I'm sure there are a few flying around though. Yeah, yeah, it's a similar. I mean, the US build I took recently, it had HMGs in it. That the armored platoon was HMGs effectively because my proper anti-armor was elsewhere. Be that flamethrowers or Panzerfaust or bazookas or whatever. So yeah, I do think actually there could be a place. It's quite little. It's pretty small. It's easy to
Yeah.
hide. Panzer One's basically the same thing, isn't it? But closed top. So it's a choice between do I want the half track, which can move further on the road, or a Panzer One, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But Panzer
but
One's not flak, so
yeah,
yeah,
but it's not open topped either.
yeah. Horses and courses.
Um, should we move into? So that's all the rules changes finished,
Yeah,
surely.
all
Just
cool.
FAQs.
Yeah, and only one. It's a good one. Do the Eintos Flamworth crew have pistols, and do also the flamethrower teams have pistols? Basically, it's only the Eintos Flamworth crewmen do. The relevance of this is when you run out and you replace the man, but actually you don't replace the man if you're an Eintos Flamworth crew because you've got a pistol. So you just get rid of your single shot flamethrower, and he still runs around with a pistol rather than being replaced with an unarmed man.
Yeah, and this is a rules change. To be absolutely clear, this should have been added as an errata as a special rule for the Iron Tossers because first of all, it actually just says both men have pistols. It doesn't say Iron Toss only.
Yes, correct.
Both
Yep.
men have pistols. So they should have errated that at the very least. But
Yep.
also the idea that you don't replace them with an unarmed man is different to the core rules
Yeah.
mechanics. And so I don't think we should just sort of flippantly FAQ this. We should have just added a special rule like Iron Toss. When you remove them, replace them with a man with a pistol. And then actually, if you do that, you don't even have to put the pistol in the equipment part.
Okay, so you make it a special rule for the unit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see
Yeah,
what you mean.
special rule
Then
called
you
Iron Tossers. And then it says when you remove your Iron Toss, you replace the model with a man with a pistol instead of an unarmed man. And then that way, in the same way army books always supersede the rule book,
yeah,
everything's nicely tidied up, and we don't have an FAQ that goes directly against core mechanics.
yeah.
But
It's nice and clear though. Yeah,
it is, yeah. Like
I
the
actually
clarity's
think
there.
I know this is an episode about the FAQ, but I think the Iron Toss Flamwerfer is worth looking at. How many times do you fire more than 2 flamethrower shots with a flamethrower team in a game?
It is
You know,
now, like 100%. It's like a demo charge because the problem with the demo charge is you've got to get there, then get away.
mm.
This allows you to drop two flamethrowers at once. Um, Actually, the thing that they didn't add, I've just realized, is does the Iron Toss have team weapon as a rule? Let's have a little look.
No, because it doesn't. It's not affected by not having a loader because there is no loader.
Team weapon, yeah. So team weapon only applies to Flammenwerfer. So we don't need the loader, which is nice and clear. Defend the fatherland. Is there anything fun we could do with defend the fatherland and your Iron Tossers?
Can't you make him Gerbeshager?
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't say yeah, there can be all three. So yeah, you could
Yeah.
have very fast tossers. Is that all of Germany completed? Shall we
Yeah, yeah,
move on
yeah.
to the good old US of A?
US, yeah. So this is as expected. It's pretty much all mostly errata rather than FAQ.
Yeah, the first one is exactly the same as the first one for the Germans. Clearly, the wording for stationary firing platform they weren't happy with, and so they're just going to errata that for those two. Hopefully, we'll see a change for future editions like of army books. Land, Air, and Sea, you must be happy about this because you were upset about the fact that your
Yes, I
airborne couldn't be
was.
regular when the gliders could be
No, no, it's
stubborn and
no, it's more
regular.
than that. It's so the unit entry for airborne in the arms of US allows you to take regular stubborn paras. Yeah, and then the by air, land, and sea entry in the US rulebook says if you take a non-para unit as airborne, so an HQ or a weapons team, they must be veteran and they must be stubborn. And I always had a problem with this because I'm like, but I can take regular stubborn para squads, but their officer has to be veteran, their mortar has to be veteran, and so on. So what this has said is basically gone, if you make them airborne, they can be regular or veteran, and they must be stubborn.
Which is good. Nice to
Yep.
have a bit of consistency. Do you know what I'd quite like to be able to make a full ranger force? That'd be nice as well. So if we can add that to the next one. What's our next amendment, Phil?
Yeah, another so air, land, and sea. If taken as veteran, Marines must be, oh sorry, may be upgraded to stubborn for +1 point a man. It's may not must. So you can
Yeah.
take non-stubborn veterans, but they've got to be veterans. Marines.
Yeah, but equally you can take regular Marines because you don't lose anything by not paying the point other than you don't have stubborn. Like they're still Marines. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it's it's basically saying if you want them to be stubborn, you have to be veteran for the Marines.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
okay. Racing through the next two,
Mm,
you can have a horse now.
yeah.
For the officers, that's brilliant. So that's all your HQ options can be given a horse.
Yeah.
Um,
The next three
then
is just points clarification.
yeah, the next three, the USMC Raiders, Merrill's Marauders, and the War Dog team came with Tough Fighter as standard. Were
Correct. Yeah.
paying 4 points for an SMG, so
Yeah.
we've knocked a point off their SMG because they were already paying for the Tough Fighter. So they all pay 3 points for an SMG now, which is nice. I think War Dogs with a few SMGs might be fun.
Yeah. You can't. They're not huge though, are they? I think
No,
maybe four at most. They're quite good fun. Yeah. You can take. So they're four. Yeah. Yeah. So it would cost you what 60 points for four 4 war dogs and the
I didn't
handlers.
say they were cost effective, to be fair.
They are cool because they actually no. Sorry, this is an FAQ episode, not a how to do well with US episode. But because they're an extra selection, if you only want to take one rifle platoon, for example, but you want a lot of units, if you're going for the MSU style build, they're quite handy because they basically just they bolt on to your 0 to 4, also not 0 to 4, 2 compulsory and 2 optional squads. You just stick another one in, so they're quite a good way of getting boots on the ground, but only having one rifle platoon to do so.
I agree. The next one,
Yeah.
I'm a bit confused by. Also, I'm a bit confused why etc. 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 is in an errata as though like it's obvious. I don't even know why I download the PDF, lads. Like it's obvious. They've changed the cost of a regular 20 twin Mark IV AA gun from 80 points down to 65, etc.
Don't,
etc.
okay.
But then your jump to veteran is 104 points. And you're only a 9 points reduction to go inexperienced at 56 points because they haven't errated those 2 points costs. And I do wonder if the etc. was intended, like the person who's written this put that in as a note to themselves to work out what the other 2 points cost should be later, and it's accidentally been included in the final draft. Yeah.
I imagine that is we just need to tidy up the points cost of this unit, and it's just been cut and pasted in from the document, etc., rather than mental note. We need to do some maths here and tidy up all 3 points costs.
Yeah, because I think because it's a standard 30% up and down as our usual
Yeah,
rule. So, for
yeah,
example, that one is 80 points and then 24 up and down.
yeah.
And so I think they put that etc. to say, work out what 30% of 65 points is at a later date and just edit that. So wouldn't be surprised if in the next FAQ that becomes, well, let me just work it out for you. So it would be
Plus or minus
it would be
30%.
46 points in experience, 45 and a half is what you would
Yeah.
get if you took exactly. And if you go the other way, it would be 84 and a half. So there you go.
Yeah, cool. The next 3 are just little changes to the weapon loadouts, or the upgrades. So I'm really pleased with the next one. This is the M6 GMC. So normally it's always been a rear-facing light anti-tank gun on a effectively on a Dodge. What it's now said is that it's front arc or rear arc, so forward or rear-facing. But then also you can add, if you really want to, an HMG with a 360 pintle mounted HMG with a 360-degree arc of fire for plus 25 points. Historically, they were forward and rear facing, and there's also evidence of them being used in an AA role. I don't
But
think
using
I'd
the
ever take
anti-tank
the
gun in an AA
no,
role
no,
or
no,
the
the
actual
the HMG,
Pintle.
the
Okay, yeah.
HMG,
So
yeah. No, sorry, no. So I don't think I'd ever use the HMG. I don't think I'd ever pay for the upgrade, but I do like the forward and rear facing
yeah, I mean it's less relevant now that we've got
double
like
pivots. Yeah,
double pivots and like it doesn't matter as much. But I agree, like that's a big perk. When I first saw this, I thought that's exciting having the HMG as well for an extra guaranteed pin. Um, but then I remembered
they're soft
you
skin.
don't, yeah, you're
Yeah,
not on the damage table. You're just gone if you take any damage. And so
yeah,
actually, once you start to get to like 90 points for a soft skin,
yeah.
I mean, you're getting into greyhound territory, aren't you? So you're starting to think, am I making the right choice here?
Yeah, I
Um,
think I think they are worth, and I've talked about them before and used them before. I think they are worth it when you look at the cost of a bazooka team inside a Jeep. But when you start going, and now I'm going to add 25 points to add an HMG, but it's going to die on a 6 on the damage table, that's when I don't think they're worth it. But yeah, I'm really pleased to see they're now forward and rear facing.
yeah. Can I jump on to the next one? Because I am actually a bit excited about the next one, which is
Yes, yeah.
because, as I said in that game, I was playing my Rangers and I was not particularly excited by them because if to get anti-tank, I've either got to take a bazooka at veteran and pay an extra 2 points in order to run it thematically, and it's just a bit. mm. Um, but I think this next one could fit with my Rangers potentially. I can probably find a nice engagement in Normandy where we had like. So the next one is a Recce Jeep can pay 10 points to turn its Pintle MMG into an HMG now. And so for 55 points, you've got a Recce Jeep with an HMG on it, which is takes care of your anti-air, because it's pintle mounted, and it gives you a little bit of anti-tank, and it actually fits that sort of like Rangers leading the way.
Yeah.
They're supported by a little recce platoon of jeeps. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and likewise with Airborne as well. Yeah, and it used to be, didn't it? In V2, you used to be able to upgrade the Recce Jeep to an HMG. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, nobody did really in V2, but I actually think in V3, you are going to see it because of that ability to put pins out. They're really nice and cheap. Yeah, they're tidy little
yeah.
vehicles.
Well, I was doing in V end of V2, I was running HMG
On
Dodgers,
Dodges, yeah.
which is it's still a decent choice. The problem for
Mm.
me is if I run my Rangers, the Dodgers have zero use because the moment I use them, I lose lead the way. So if I put the
Yeah,
Rangers in the
yeah, yeah,
Dodge
yeah,
to
yeah.
use it as a transport, it's also the thing that I discovered is I basically got no use of my special rules for my nation because I took enough SMGs because I was going to be point blank that I didn't get fire maneuver. I'm obviously not going to put them in reserve to get that perk, and I'm not taking an
And you're
FAO.
taking an
And
FA, yeah.
so, like, I didn't really get any benefit at all, which was a bit of a shame to run an army and not get their national characteristics. But I digress. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah, yeah. So the last errata, Jeeps, you can make them amphibious for free. Cool.
This is awesome. The Seeper's back. I think it's not like game changing in terms of we're going to suddenly see them, but it was a bit of a shame because I think everyone likes a Seep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the only FAQ is with regards to when do Rangers lead the way, specifically in reference to prep bombardment. So it's in that section, it's that start of game phase, basically. So you do your deployment, then you do your start of game phase. And the first one is infiltrators. The second one is any other things that happen before the start of the game. And then you move on to it. But prep bombardment and special moves both occur in that section. Any things that happen at the start of the game. So there was a question is a question as to which one takes priority in phase 2 of the start of turn game section. In V2, it wasn't an issue. It was clarified in an FAQ that happens before prep
Yeah, and
bombardment.
actually, because of that FAQ, I think it was actually included in the main rulebook that it goes, as you said, it goes infiltrators, any special rules that happen at the start of the game, and then prep. I'm pretty certain in the table it says that explicitly. Let me have a look. And so this for me was actually a really nice FAQ because it was a rule as written. And my only criticism was it'd be nice to have the page reference. Because I remember when we first got V3, this was
Yeah.
one of the things that I checked for. So I think somewhere buried in here, there is a very specific
So I
other
think the
start
only,
of game rules. After all
yeah.
deployment has been done, including infiltrators, then you execute any unit special ability that is triggered at the start of the game. Some units get a free move, for example. If both have it, the winner decides which player executes all of these rules first.
So if you jump to land grab, which is the
Mm-hmm.
only, not the only mission, but one of the missions that has prep bombardment, and if you read the mission, the setup basically description, it says prep bombardment happens after infiltrators have been deployed,
Hmm.
but it doesn't say anything about Rangers lead the way. So prep bombardment happens after infiltrators have been deployed, and Rangers lead the way happens after infiltrators have been deployed. But which one of prep bombardment and Rangers lead the way happened first?
Where does it say prep bombardment happens after infiltrators? Which
It's
paragraph am I looking for?
uh, one moment, caller. Page 175.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking in the prep bombardment section, and it says
Oh, it does say in that section there specifically because you were
prep
talking about land grab. I
bombardments.
was looking at land grab. It
Yeah,
says
so
it says exactly as you said after
after infiltrators
infiltrators
are
are
deployed.
deployed and
Yeah.
consult. So yeah, actually rules is written. It's the opposite to what the US FAQ says, but actually US FAQ is better because imagine if you paid a point a man for a rule that like doesn't give you that benefit. I'd be pretty sad about it.
What would have been nice here, and this has happened a few times recently, is just another line in terms of actually, if the question was when does Rangers lead the way occur, and if the response was after deployment, after infiltrators, before prep bombardment, and before the first turn when using meeting engagement deployment type. Because there's been conversations online about do Rangers lead the way how do Rangers lead the way when you've got meeting engagement as a deployment type, and some people are reading it that they don't lead the way because it's to do with the wording of when things are deployed.
Yeah, I think maybe I would have errated the prep bombardment box there to say after all phases at the start of the game, like after like list, because you know how there's the phases where it's like infiltrators, all the other special rules. Because actually, I can't see a special rule where you would want it to come after prep anyway. You
I know, I
always
agree
want
with
prep
that.
to be just before the game starts, and so
Yeah.
I would change that to say prep happens immediately before turn one, after all other pre-gaming has happened.
Yeah, no, I was changing the question to not be about
Yeah,
prep, but actually to be about when does Rangers lead the way occur, and Rangers
yeah,
always lead the way, whether or not you're playing prepare positions, fog of war, or meeting engagement.
yeah. I was just thinking from a bigger perspective because I could totally see this is going to come up again and again with like Sparrow tactics if the Chinese ever return.
Yeah,
All these kind of like little quirky rules as we add them.
yeah,
It would be great just to have it errated, so we
yes.
always have
Prep
it.
bombardment is the first thing you do before you start turn one, something like that.
Perfect. So that's the three FAQs,
Yes,
fully discussed, fully questioned.
yeah. When's an
There,
errata, not an errata? Yeah.
there is one other document that was dropped today. I believe it was dropped today. It's the first time I've noticed it anyway, which is the
It
quick reference guide. When did that go live?
Yeah, I don't know when it went live. I noticed it today as well. Yep.
Because actually, I wanted to talk about that anyway. But one thing, the reason that I thought this is a good point to bring it up, partly because we're finished the FAQs, but also off the back of that idea of like how you start the game, that would be nice to be in here.
Just a flow chart.
You could print it double sided with the missions on and a flow chart of setting up because effectively you could print this on. I mean, I probably want to print it on A3 depending on your eyesight, but you could print it on A4 and you could have the other side be your how to set up the game thing with your, as you say, a flow chart and the six missions with the victory conditions. Um, and then it is literally like one page rules at that point.
I'm pretty sure it comes from the Battle of the Bulge starter set. When you bought the starter sets, you used to get in the card inlay, you used to get a quick reference play sheet. Pretty sure it's just that.
Yeah, people have been making these for a long time
Yeah,
in the community, so it's actually quite nice to have an
yeah.
official PDF version rather than just an unofficial PDF. So yeah, well done, Warlord. I quite like that.
So there we have it, the latest FAQ. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully that's been able to explain a bit of the context as well. Let us know what you think in the comments or drop us a message, drop us an email. Quite a bit coming up. We have got, in no particular order, we've got an episode of Conflict 47. I was recently at the UK Games Expo, got a chance to see a lot of the new stuff that's been released, had a long chat with some of the Warlord staff, so look out for that. We've also got the Armies of Great Britain happening within 2 weeks. We'll be able to talk about that. And we've also got some guests coming up, so quite a lot going on over the next couple of months or so. Then later on in the year, we've got a lot of tournaments to talk about, including the English Open. If you haven't bought your ticket already, do please get onto it. There is literally a handful left. We sold the 40 in less than a week. We had extra ones added. They've nearly all gone. Once these have gone, there are no more. So if you're still on the fence, please do grab a ticket. They are going quickly.
Yeah, and if you have bought a ticket, thank you for supporting us. I think it'll be a brilliant one this year because people are embedded in the V3. And so I think we're going to start to see some really fun thematic armies at Warfare. But ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.